Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood production. Happy spoilers. Yeah, spoiler season's done now, but it just finished up at the time of us recording the video here. Our
Yeah.
spoiler just went out 36 minutes ago, so you can tell this is pretty fresh. We kind of waited for like almost every spoiler to be out before making this kind of video because we wanted to be like kind of as up to date as we could.
Yeah.
Obviously, these are all very preliminary kind of views, just based on what we know and based on what we think will be good. I am joined by my co-creator, co-commentator, co-caster, co-compatriot Rob, who is moving to a new place in about a week and a half,
Yeah.
2 weeks. So you're gonna see a
Very,
new
very
background yet
busy.
again. Yeah, my
Yeah.
background's not changing, but his was gonna get changed one more
It
time.
will be. It'll be a nice. I'm gonna get a nice background too. I want like shelving with like
You
my
gotta get the
product
shelving with
in
all your
there.
fab stuff. Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
understand.
absolutely.
You're gonna be like a true. You're just gonna be
A
like a
true
true
YouTuber.
content creator. Yeah, just
Yeah, yeah.
all your crap just out there.
Eventually, probably in
Um,
2 weeks' time.
no, that's fair. So we have our top 10 here. We're gonna start it off,
Hmm.
and this is for CC. I don't know if I said that. We're gonna do another top 10 for limited. I would like to play some limited before I
Oh
just like
yeah.
kind of talk out of my ass and be like, this card's good for limited. And it's like, well, let's play some limited first and
This.
make sure it's
I think it
not
might be
full of
one of the
it, right?
funnest limited sets. Looking
It
at the
might be like
cards,
you don't have to worry
it's
about. Yeah, I think there's like very specific cards that when you see them, you'll be like, I'll probably want to play this mech. I think the mechs are distinct enough, the heroes,
mhm.
that especially like the more
Yeah.
hyperdriver focused ones are going to be
They have
max
like very
cards.
specific lanes that they fit into. Right.
Yeah, the more like zero cost, one cost items might be more like Dash IO or
Mhm.
Database, I think is the young one. And then you might have like all the Evo equipment might be more along the lines of Teklovasin, right? So you definitely have more of a spice. And I think they've done a pretty good job from the spoiler season
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
expanding on the personality of these kind of heroes. So we're
Right.
going to start it
But
off with a
for
non-mech
today,
card.
CC only.
Yeah, just CC for this one. Start with non-mech card. I did look at the other non-mech cards. I think some of them can be good. This one is the most obviously good to me, and I think it'll
Hmm.
come in almost immediately. I think this card you can slot in immediately without any real changes, to be honest, that you need to make for this card. So it's Tome of the Imperial Flame. Man, this guy's like a great library of Solana, like tomes. These New
Hmm.
Zealanders, they really do read a lot. So we've got yet another tome. It's got to be like the seventh, eighth, or ninth tome or whatever it is.
Yep.
Um, so it could be like one of those nice staples of Royal Dromai. I remember Royal Dromai when they were all running Crown of Dominion.
It's been a while.
Before yeah, it's been before they were running Time Skippers. Now they're running Time Skippers, but they were running for the gold. They want to pitch turn zero to make sure they'd have Ash and stuff like that. Well, we might be going back to Royal Dromai with the Crown of Dominion here. This
Hmm.
particular card fits well more in a red line deck, like a heavy red line deck, allowing for like greater resource generation to summon the bigger dragons. So we're talking about like Dominia and Tomotai because those are the ones that like when they come down, they come down. It's not just some like inches. You're taking miles here when
Yep.
these guys come down. A lot more counterplay for these decks that are generally more one-dimensional as redline, because obviously as redline, you can imagine you don't really get everything you could be doing here. So at at absolute worst, it's still a
It's
red
good
zero
value.
cost go again action.
Yep.
Yeah, it's at the very core, it still gives all your dragons go again, right? On red line, you could easily play the card, pitch two reds, so it's a good starting target for Ash generation. So
Yep.
you can not have to rely on the gold. So what you could do is you can put this in tandem with the gold from Crown of Dominion. Use this pitch to use the two pitch to draw another card off the gold if you're like fishing for one more card if you want. So if you really need it, it's there, which is nice for flexibility. You can also, more importantly, activate Flamescale Furnace using one of the two pitch that you just generated to go from 2 to 1 to 3. It's kind of like Techno Foundry Heart in that
Hmm.
kind of instance, right? So you have the two, you pay the one, but you have two reds in pitch because of this card. So you have three pitch, and that easily allows you to summon something like Dominia because it really just takes one more red, and you've just drawn two more cards,
Yeah.
right? So Dominia, even Tomotai out of Arsenal with a little bit of luck from hand is possible, which in a lot of cases is just easier than waiting for a blue because there's a lot of these big dragon decks that are just like, I don't want to get rid of this dragon. I really need it ASAP,
Hmm.
but they just don't get the blues because even the big dragon decks don't run a ton of blues either. So I think this card will fit in both of those, uh, but it's more obviously good in the red line deck. So that is Tome of the Imperial Flame.
Nice. Okay. Next we have gas up.
Very gassy card. It's common. It's pretty funny
I'm surprised
because
it's a common. It's very nice.
it's some of the best cards in Fab are commons and rares. So they're kind of going along the same lines here. This is a specifically good card. So I wouldn't say this is like generically super powerful. on the surface, but it is a powerful card, being a 1 for 4 with cycling essentially. And what I mean by that, not just because he's on a bike or she's on a bike. I
No
haven't
pun
actually looked at
intended.
the artwork. So someone's on the bike here.
It's a she.
Uh,
There's a dog down there. Pretty nice.
there's a dog. So I was looking at the dog actually. So it is a 1 for 4 with cycling that grabs Hyperdriver. So we're specifically looking at Max for this card as being like, if you see this card in draft on the red one, you might want to go with Max. You know, it
Yeah.
just has a lot more synergy. Gives any Hyperdriver he controls crank. That's the important part. That's Max's hero ability. It's one part of it, right?
Yeah.
And so since it specifies put a Hyperdriver into the arena, you don't have to pay the 1 cost for your Hyperdriver. So you know the red Hyperdriver is in the set, so it will be available in limited and CC. You don't have to pay the 1 cost. You usually would, or two. It would be usually a 2 cost if you use Max to create one. You don't have to use an action point. That's a big deal.
That's a big
because
deal.
you're just playing one regularly uses one. Using Max also, like, Max doesn't have go again. You would have to crank the Hyperdriver to get your action point back. But here you net 1 action point if you crank, because Gas Up has go again. You're good to go there. You put the Hyperdriver in, you crank, you gain 1 action point, and you just have 2 action points, right? So you're going to net 1 and then take 1 counter off the Hyperdriver. So your Hyperdriver from Banish, if it's red, it'll come out with 2 counters, which is still totally okay.
Yeah.
The upside of having Hyperdriver and Banish is very, very high on this card, and the low end isn't awful. That's kind of how I see this card. Like, the low end isn't awful enough, so when you don't have Hyperdriver and you can't just sit on this card, it's still a 1 for 4, which isn't that bad, right? There are plenty of ways to get Hyperdriver and Banish, either directly from boosting, which a lot of Max decks will have pretty heavy on the boost. Other mech decks could also, or get into the graveyard via using, using 1 up. So after the counters are gone, it goes to the graveyard, right? And then you scrap. And there's a bunch of cards that scrap. Most of them don't boost, from what I've seen. I think most of them do not boost.
They seem to be like a separate, like, they have a separate
tier.
Utility altogether. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if they boosted, they would be a little bit too broken, honestly.
Yeah, if they did everything, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yes, but there are a bunch of scrap cards that can get into the Banish. You do have to run, I think, in CC to get the most out of this card, a minimum of 3 Hyperdrivers. But it could be very good into like a Nitro Mechanoid deck, for instance, that very much wants these Hyperdrivers regardless. So that is Gas Up.
Yeah, very, very good card. All right, next we have Fabricate, probably the next. Is this the next Art of War? I don't know.
I was super surprised they printed this card. No, I don't think it's stupid powerful. I think it's powerful for sure. But yeah, it's essentially the Mechanologist Art of War. It's a 0-cost red, obviously, but it does have the choose 2 out of 4, right? Yep. So the mech instant 0-cost has many powerful effects. So likely be a 2 or 3 of in like equipment Evo builds, because it is. I mean, you can see on the picture, it does kind of look like more of a Tech Leviathan card. Doesn't mean it solely is. It just hints at being maybe a little bit more powerful on him. Like, as of writing, as of kind of doing this whole video, is the only way we've seen of equipping your base equipment from inventory. So the proto, the very first one, the proto equipment base, it is the only thing we can see that can essentially re-equip. So once something is gone, get something back into that slot, which allows you to fully utilize Evo equipment, whether or not it was destroyed of your own accord or not, right? Because if someone else destroyed, like, there are things that can destroy equipment, or make you block with it. Of course, we've seen that too, to destroy it, right? So the Evo permanents getting +1 being the second one can result in anywhere from about 4 extra blocking power if you use the full 4, but the interesting thing is that it can give 0 blocking armor that doesn't have Blade Break or Temper, free blocking power it couldn't do before. So the Evo Breaker set, which Rob's going to talk about one of them in particular, but that card does block for 0. So what you could do is you block with it, and then when it goes back to the equipment suite, it just has a -1 counter, but it doesn't break, which is pretty great. Yeah, which is pretty great. So you don't have to, like, it's good on other equipment. You just +1, and so they have a counter, but they're still going to use -1 of that utility, just like a one-time use. So I think that's actually pretty nifty. Putting it under an Evo permanent can give you another activation of that Evo. So some Evos say, banish a card under this, do a thing.
Right.
So Fabricate will count as one of those cards. And I think some of these are pretty powerful as far as the value. You can get pretty good value out of that. Or possibly a hero through transformation. As of this video, we do not know what the Tech Leviathan specialization transform does, but we can assume it is a demi-hero. So we do know it's a demi-hero like Leviathan. So we do know transforming into a hero, because there's other cards that have said, like the Soul Steel, the Soul ones, that they double essentially in effect. memory soul and stuff like that.
Oh,
Those kinds
right.
of cards. So um, that's pretty interesting too. And then banishing an Evo to draw a card. It seems like kind of seems like the least ideal. However, because it's a net negative because you're spending 2 cards, so
Yeah.
this card, one of these cards effect, and another card to draw a card. It doesn't
Yeah.
seem very useful for
It's
the
hand fixing, I guess, if you really have to.
it is hand fixing, but it's very useful for the Evo Breaker set because that set is the only one that doesn't block. It doesn't have a
Right.
blocking value on the bottom right, um,
Yeah.
as of right now. Right, it only has 0, so you can't really it doesn't really do it. You can't really get it out of your hand. I guess you could technically block for
If you
0, but
want
like
to.
that's just like that's a
Yeah.
very poor way of like getting out
Utilizing
of
that
your hand.
card. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's just like another way you can get it out, right? Because it does specifically say um, banishing an Evo. So
Yeah.
it is targeting those specific cards,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then the other piece is like when you already have that Evo on, like when you draw the second one, because you can run more than one of these Evo equipments in your deck, right? So if you already have one equipped and you don't need it, this is
Yeah.
a way to get rid of the second one.
That's a
So
good point. You
it's
will see
just
some redundancy equipping Evos, right? Like, you might
exactly.
want
And if
them
like you
too.
need more pitch or something like that to do it, you can use one of them to do the card, and then the other one to like go put it under an Evo or whatever, because you really need that Evo effect.
Yeah.
That is Fabricate. I think it's very, very good. I think you'll see a 2 or 3 of, as I said. Pretty interested to see like the broken things you can. I'm waiting to see how people break this, just like our Art
Yeah.
of War happened.
I'm also looking forward to seeing how people mix the mech archetypes a little bit. Here we're
Hmm.
seeing them like they're very linear, right? Like you would see, obviously, let's put this in Teklevossen, but seeing how
Yeah.
like Dash or Max can use this too, especially because they can use Evo as well. So it's interesting to see maybe how they're going to use these cards. But for now,
Yeah.
even if it's just Teklevossen, it's pretty strong.
Yeah. I agree.
All right,
On
next
to
we
the next
have
one here.
Scrap Trader.
Now, Scrap Trader, I thought was a lot worse, and that's the reason. The reason being is they released it a little too early on the schedule.
Right.
So I think the fact that like this was the one of the first. Other, I think the
Yeah.
Junkyard Dog had Scrap on it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
like as far as like a purely scrap card, this is the first big one because it's essentially a 0 for 4, right? So it's a very interesting card and
Yeah.
allows you not only to get their 4 resources through a double scrap, but at least a very, very high value turns as like Teklevoss. And I think that's kind of like, I think the scrap mechanic is going to shine a little bit more in Teklevossen than the other heroes because he can play Evos from Banish.
Mhm.
So, and then scrap, you can do equipment, right? You can scrap equipment or you can scrap an item, right? So it works for both of them. And so what you could do is you can double scrap. One of them could be the Evo equipment that you're wanting to play, gain 4 resources, right, off your double scrap.
Mhm.
Use Teklevoss's hero power, which costs 3, so you have 1 floating, and then pitch an additional blue to be able to fully pay and play for like an
Right.
Evo Steel Soul equipment
Right.
because it costs 4.
Costs 4.
So
Yeah.
all of that just a single action point because Teklevossen does it as an instant, right? So you're able to just like use your action points, scrap trader, then you can play it for
Mhm.
banish, pitch to 3, and then get your equipment on because he can play it as an instant, which is very powerful.
Yeah.
Really helps towards like a Teklo outvalue you game plan because you're able to just like recycle and use and then play the stuff from banish, and then if you can get it back into the grave, you can kind of rinse and repeat, which is very interesting because if you can re-equip with Fabricate, get another base equipment, you could keep using these Evo Soul Steals and these real powerful effects, right? So I'm actually pretty interested in that kind of game plan. I'll definitely be building a deck towards that,
Right.
see what I can do towards it. But that is Scrap Trader.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Plus, there's a lot of cards that can give you 2 action points through boosting. Plus, like, I mean, if you run, the of course, the high octane, you're gonna get 2 action points there. You can play high scrap
Yep.
trader, and you have your action point to play
Yep.
something else after that.
Exactly. High
Plus, with
Octane just
all the
infinite
crank
value.
stuff too. Yeah, all the crank.
Yep.
You'll find a way to play this with extra action points, I'm sure.
I agree.
All
Yep.
right. Next, we have. I guess I've got 2 that are kind of together: Terminator Tank and War Machine.
Yeah. So the reason I like did it because it's the same card other than a one piece of the line of text, and that text is essentially what it's targeting. So it's the same sort of category, but a lot of mech
Right.
lists are likely not going to want to include much of if any generics. A lot of mech lists, pure boost lists didn't really include any because they always want to be hitting kind of thing. So generally lack useful disruptive abilities on these mech cards because the biggest disruption is like CNC and stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? So Terminator Tank and War Machine target the hand and arsenal respectively, and on 2 evos it becomes a 3 for 6 with disruption. Becomes like a very real tool to buy space to set up a bigger board. So if you don't need it early, it still blocks for 3. And I think in the late game, when you do have those like 2+ evos, like 6 overpower,
With
9
disruption.
overpower off 4 evos. That's how you end the game.
Yeah,
Like that's how you end the game. You know
it
what I
could be
mean? So
a very
especially
real win con, I think, if you
yeah,
have
if
the
you're able to
full
get a
evo
bunch of
set.
yeah, if you're able to get a bunch of action points, use stuff like scrap trader, get a bunch of resources, stuff like that. Have Tekla cores out, rinse and repeat. Have a bunch of action points, just beat down people. It seems pretty realistic here. So that is kind of the last card that I think will become a lot more staple as the time kind of goes on here. Terminator
Yeah,
Tank and War Machine.
it kind of reminds me of Alpha Rampage for Brute a little bit. 3 for 9. No
Yeah,
disruption on Alpha Rampage, but the Intimidate does kind of overlap with Overpower a bit
you
to get
talk it.
that extra
Brood
damage
doesn't
through.
deserve. Brood doesn't
Disruption?
deserve destruction. Don't tell
They
me
they
that.
they can't have that. No, that would break the
No,
game
you could have
probably.
CNC and that's it.
Yeah, that's all they get. Yeah, or like random effects, like random item
Yeah.
destruction. Okay, well, I've got a few cards to talk about. First one would be the legendary headpiece for mech, Hyper X3. I'll just read it out. Whenever you banish a hyperdriver from boosting, put it under this card, so you can keep racking up hyperdrivers under this card. And once per turn, when a hyperdriver is put under this, if there are 3 or more hyperdrivers, you can draw a card. So importantly, setting up's going to take some time. You're going to want to get your first 2. Nothing's going to happen. But once you get your 3rd, your 4th, your 5th, you always draw a card from that effect once per turn. So it can be a very good way to utilize your boosted hyperdrivers. It's also a battle worn one, which is, I think, the best. I don't think anything else has battle worn for a
No,
headpiece for mech.
nothing has battle worn anymore. Just like
Yeah,
as just like a keyword. It's
just
just like
use it
always
once and
temper or
it
blade
breaks.
break.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's a rare sight. So it's very nice. You can block it with it once and keep the armor piece. So yeah, this is really good value. This is basically a headpiece tunic if you can utilize it really like fully. And you can get
Yeah.
a card every turn if you're boosting hyperdrivers away. So it's really strong. And one thing I will mention too is that it prevents hyperdrivers from staying in the banish zone. So if you're relying on cards like we talked about earlier, like maybe gas up,
Hmm.
you won't have them in
Anti
banish zone
synergy.
anymore. There's a bit of anti synergy there, but I think that you might. So if you're running this card, you probably wouldn't want to run gas up in that case.
No.
Sorry, I
I,
spoiled the
I
next
think
card.
yeah.
But
No, it's fine. I think the key here is that, and the reason why I really like the card is for
mhm.
the Nitro Mechanoid play, specifically with Max. And
Mm,
the reason is because
yeah,
you're not always able to get hyperdrivers back from the banner zone and put them into play for Nitro Mech because you still need 3 like on the field. They don't count if they're under your Hyper X3. Like they need
right,
to
right.
be on the field, right? So this allows you to, if you happen to boost them, at least they're not gone, and you don't have to spend time trying to get them back. Because I don't know how much space in the deck you could. I don't know how much space in that deck you have to fill in things that can get these back from banish.
Yeah, there
Um,
were a few options before this
there
set
were,
came
but
out,
like,
but they weren't great,
yeah,
and never felt great to play them. It's always at a detriment,
no,
really.
correct. Yeah, and the other big piece is you can use these to banish off Nitro Mechanoid to keep attacking, which is kind of wild because like all
True.
of this stuff just goes under Nitro Mechanoid and everything in this Hyper X3 stack. However many hyperdrivers, let's
Right.
say you miss on all 3, so you got 3
Yeah.
hyperdrivers under this thing. If you're max, you just create them. You just create 3, so you'll always kind of have hyperdrivers,
Hmm.
and then you just Mechanoid with 3 more attacks seems pretty pog.
Yeah.
So
The
same.
key is, yeah, the key as you mentioned is once the hyperdrivers are under this card, they can't be used, but
Mhm.
they are countered towards attacking
They
with the
still
Nitro
count. They
Mechanoid.
still count as a
They'll do
card. Yeah, you just
something.
can't use them.
So there's some
Yeah.
very good synergy with that whole play style, I think, with Hyper
Yes.
X3. I think this is going to be pretty much an auto run.
On that
Pending
play,
pending
yeah,
some
for sure.
Evo things, yeah, because you can't
Yeah.
use Evo on top of this. But if you're not doing the
It's not a
Evo
base. Yeah.
routes, it's pretty good. I'd play it.
It's sideboard.
Yeah, that's true. Good sideboard. Yeah. Okay. Next, as I spoiled, there is the next another Evo, or the first Evo equipment I think we're talking about today. The Evo
Yes.
Facebreaker. So I'll just read it out. It's an arm piece. It is an instant equipment, right? So you can play this at
Wild.
instant speed. That's really cool. Just like quickly strap on your arm piece and do something
Yeah.
cool with it. So if you have a base arms equipped, transform it. This is basically Evo stuff. Like all of them do this. Transform it. Oh, but and X hyperdrivers you control on into this. Then equip this. If you do, the next time you would be dealt damage this turn, prevent twice X of that damage. So
Yes.
it's very good
English.
damage prevention. Once, yeah, sorry. So you take your 2 hyperdrivers, put them under, and you can prevent 4 damage, if I understood that correctly. So really
Yes.
nice.
That's correct.
And the important now here's the real meat to the card. Whenever you boost an attack action card away, you may destroy a card under this, and if you do, the attack gains +2. This is essentially Teklo Pounder, but you can do it, as many times as you want in one turn, right? Whenever you boost, just keep paying the card underneath it, get +2.
You don't have to. No once per turn.
No once per turn shenanigans, yeah. So insane value. I think that this card is. I mean, you can't keep adding. Unfortunately, it's only once you play the card you can put X number of drivers under.
You can fabricate under this.
You can fabricate.
So that's kind of what I was talking about. Fabricate getting like an extra value.
You can.
So one of those put it under an Evo permanent.
Exactly.
Very, very interesting. The synergies here.
Yeah. So that'd be a cool use case, exactly. But yeah, I mean this card. Oh, as you said, also you can fabricate to give this +1 armor, so you can actually block with this and then just take it back. It won't bother you. But yeah, insane arm piece. True. I think the damage prevention is going to be pretty key because it's instant speed damage prevention.
It's any damage. It doesn't say physical. This can block for arcane. That's fantastic.
I mean, this wildfire. Goodbye. This card's just gonna prevent.
It's a very real annoyance if you do have the hyperdrivers. But yeah. So I think it's a very good. I think it's probably the best Evo best in this instant equipment series out of the set. 4. Yeah, I think this one's the best. Yeah, in the 4, I think this one's the best.
I agree.
Probably one of the best that I've seen Evo. Period. But it is a majestic. I mean, it's
not. Like
it probably should be good. Yeah, it's not one of the commoner rares. So yeah. I think it's very good also. 0 cost. Very, very nice.
Next I've got the Pulsewave protocol. So for the protocol series, we got 3 cards. There's a red, yellow, and blue. Similar to how Vincent had his 3 annihilation, or whatever this set was called. Her. I'm sorry. I always think he's a guy. Yes. Vincent, Iron Maiden, not Iron Man.
Not Iron Man.
Yeah. So I decided to narrow in on the yellow protocol card. The red one was too specific to removing Steam counters, so only really good in a mirror type thing where you're playing a mech. It probably would be a very good sideboard card, but I think this card has more versatility towards any matchup. So I'll read it out. It is a yellow 3 costed 6 attack card, 3 blocks. So looking at that already, it's not so bad. And then Evo upgrade. When this attacks a hero, they reveal X cards from their hand, where X is the number of Evos you have equipped. So from 0 to 4. And then choose an action card with defense less than X, then add it to this chain link as a defending card. So you can play this card when you have 0 Evos. It won't really do anything, but at 1, your opponent then gives you 1 card from their hand, and you pick the 1 card if it happens to have less defense than the number of Evos, then you can block with it. But this card really shines when you have 3 or 4 Evos equipped.
Yeah.
I think the best case scenario is if you have 4 equipped, because you can see the opponent's entire hand, and they have no choice in what they show you, right? Yeah, exactly. And 3 blocks is a big thing.
And you're choosing it too. So you're choosing whatever it is off the 4. So it's like a big boy harpoon.
Pulsewave harpoon.
Because it's instead of a 1 for 4, it's a 3 for 6. So it's the same ratio.
Right.
But this is a yellow.
I just remembered that. It's a popper.
It is a popper. Yeah. It is a yellow. So that's a big change because harpoon was a red. Yeah. Now, because it's a 3 cost, that's probably a little bit worse for its case because it's just very expensive to play. However, you can get this later on. You can pitch it for second cycle when you do have those Evos, because a lot of these mech decks are going to probably a good chunk of them are going to go to second cycle, I imagine, to extract value, and that's kind of where these big chunky mech at 6 power, like the tanks, like the war tanks and all these like dominator effects, stuff like that. That's kind of where like Evo upgrade becomes very, very powerful.
I do see a lot of these mech decks being on the slower side because you are setting up a lot of stuff with your Evo equipment.
Sure.
It's a complete like lack of tempo, right? You're going more for the late game builds. So a lot of the cards that you're going to pitch early, you'll likely see back later on because you're just taking it so slow and taking your time. But this card, especially on 4 Evo, it becomes such a disruption tool that your opponent, you get to pick whatever card your opponent has in their hand and make them block with it, basically. And then you can tear down combos. You can tear down like starters if they're playing Dromai or something. You can take those cards out of their hands, and then they're stuck with basically a non-turn. So really, really strong. You can boost a few cards and play this to finish off. If they're not blocking anything, great. You just play this and then make them block with something, and it's really, really good. So I think this card will definitely see value, especially because it's yellow. Not like the red drill version. I forget what it's called, but yeah. All right. I've got 2 cards left. The next is the MetEx, not FedEx. MetEx.
like you always have puns every set,
Yeah,
and
I do
one of them
enjoy
was
looking at all the cards looking for puns.
Yuki's spoiler was Fender Bender, which I found pretty funny.
That is pretty great.
And then the second one I saw was MetEx, and then there's another one. There's like one more that I saw was pretty interesting. So
Yeah,
I
but
like Big Bertha too, but that's for
I
later.
love that's might be coming up then.
Yeah, but
So
MetEx,
MedX.
yeah,
So it is. There's a series of cards that have the same effect. So it says when this hits, you may put an item with cost 0 or 1 from your hand into the arena. I think there's like a 0 for 3 version and a 2 for 5 version. The 1 for 4 is just the best value because the 4
yeah,
is a breakpoint that's really hard. It's really
yeah.
annoying to block out. The 0 for 3, of course, one card will deal with it, so you don't really care. And 2 for 5 is accomplishing the same thing as the 1 for 4, just with 1 extra
Yeah.
damage, so it's below rate. So this was the best in my opinion, and probably the only card of that whole series that's going to see play. But it is very good for getting items out of your hand. It's a boost card 1 for 4, so at worst card, in the worst case, you're still playing this card to boost and synergizing with your boost effects and banishing items for other effects. But in best case scenario, you can play out a hyperdriver from hand, or any of the slew of zero costed items we've seen so far. There's a lot now, and not
Yeah,
necessarily
cost
all of them
items.
have crank. I don't. They might, a lot of them do have crank, but some of them don't. So this
Yeah,
you can use this
for their
also
action
for
point.
like an extra action point for your crank. Exactly. You can get your Foundry, not Foundry, Teklo Core. I'm sorry, and then that comes out for free.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a lot of utility with this card. It's just kind of a natural fit in a lot of the decks that we've seen so
It's a
far.
value generator. That's what this
Value
card is.
generator, and at worst case, 1 for 4 is fine. We still play the yellow
Zipper hit.
zipper hits. Thank
I
you.
mean, it's yellow, but yeah, I get your
Yeah,
point though. It still blocks for 3. It's fine.
exactly. Yeah, sorry, it's yellow, but it blocks for 3, so it's fine.
Yeah,
All right. Speaking of the Big Berth, we've got Big Bertha here.
that's for last.
It's the last card I have, but I think this card is so cool. First of all, mainly because of the art. This thing's so
Yeah,
funny, just narrowly fitting through these like these buildings. Huge body, tiny little legs and arms. It's kind of funny, kind of cute too. So it's a blue, blocks for
yeah.
3.
We got Rob's next cosplay for the Fab event. Gonna
I
be
gotta
big
get a
bird.
little bigger for this one. So yeah, blue blocks 3. That's quite nice already. Costs 3, so that's the downside. But it is a boost card, so you can boost things. But most importantly is when you banish this card from boosting, you can put a Steam counter on a hyperdriver you control. So these kind of cards that have effects from not necessarily being in your hand can be very powerful. We see that with
Mhm.
Bolton, with all the if you charge these yellow cards,
Charge
you
it.
get extra
Yeah.
abilities. Before charging didn't really give you anything, but now you're using the card
Maybe depression.
for more than it initially did before. So instead of being just a random card you're boosting away, now you're going to be getting a Steam counter on your hyperdriver. So I
Yeah.
think this is going to be a natural fit. I think 3 of this for sure in most decks that are going to run hyperdrivers, if not all of them really. So Max is going to like
Mhm.
this card a lot. But
Yeah.
yeah, kind of said everything I need to say about this card. I think it's quite good.
I think, yeah, I think like the red, it's crankshaft, right? Which was kind of necessary and mechanoid, but the issue with
Mm,
crankshaft is even like at a 9 ofs, you just kind of felt sometimes you just never saw one off the boost, or
yeah,
you just end up drawing it instead.
yep.
Um,
And they kind of
which is
hurt
fine.
because
You just
the red ones and the yellows weren't great, I guess. But because
yeah,
this
just
is
two
like a
for
blue, you
fives,
can
two
just
for
pitch it
whatever.
away. Yeah.
Yeah, you could pitch it away. So I think this card will be very like prominent in the more nitro builds or the nitro sideboard
Mm-hmm.
options because getting that extra seam counter just allows you to a block with a card and still get like extra pitch off boost. Especially if you have more hyperdrivers, you're able to do that more. So it helps with your plan of actually like if you need an extra turn and you don't want to die because there's like a crazy on hit or something like that, it
Mm-hmm.
just helps you get a little bit more room. So that's kind of where I see this card landing. But
Mm-hmm.
as Rob said, it's a blue 3 cost 3 block. It's not
It's
hurting anybody. It's
harmless. Yeah, yeah.
it's Dread Triptych. Come on, it's not that
It's Red
bad.
Triptych. I would have fit everywhere, even though it wasn't necessarily
Yeah,
attacked with. Yeah.
yeah, that one's a majestic. No, anyways,
True.
so that's the last card. Let us know what you think of any of these particular cards. If you agree with these picks, or if you have like other cards that definitely popped up as being, in classic constructed something you want to look at for top 10. Let us know. Let us know why. We're definitely curious about people's opinions in this regard. And with that, if you like this kind of content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And with that, from wherever you were watching, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.